For us, having a meal together as a family is really important. It was more of a principle that we want to have family time together. And so we'll say no to something so that we can connect and have a family meal together.
The stronger that each family becomes, the stronger the community.
The more you serve, the more you're going to breathe life into people, the more people are going to receive that.
For a lot of people, it's not that they don't want to change. They never realized there was a need to change.
We all know what it feels like when death is spoken to us.
These neurons have these protein molecules that are very receptive to the life message. It's not just the words we use, it's our attitudes, it's our smile. God knew this. God understood this. He's the creator of this most ingenious thing that we call the mind, the brain. Speaking life is the language of heaven, because when you speak life, you're speaking the character of Christ.
Welcome to the Life Parenting Podcast, hosted by Growing Families, where our desire is to help you as parents create a life-giving home environment in which to guide, nurture, and train your children in a God-honoring way. Welcome to episode 3. We're going to be talking about the life-giving home environment, and it's really building on episode 2, where we talked about speaking life.
Yeah. If you haven't watched that episode or listened to it, go back and catch it.
Yeah.
Really foundational.
Listen to it again if you've already listened to it. I say that because I've probably heard the teaching, I don't know how many times, at least a couple dozen. And I'm just reminded there's just something else that I can be doing to speak more life. It's sometimes very humbling to keep listening to it because I feel like I really should have gotten this by now, but I've resigned myself to the fact that it is a lifelong journey. I'm just going to keep refining myself.
Well, I know sometimes when I listen to it, I'm really excited because I feel like I'm getting it.
That's good.
And I'm making progress. And then there's other times where I feel like, man, I've got so far to go.
Operating.
So Gary and Emery, good to have you guys with us again for this episode. Emery, what would you say to those people where you hear that message on speaking life and you just feel the weight, the bricks weighing you down because you're like, man, I'm just not there. I'm not there.
You both really kind of explained it so well. My thoughts were, because I remember when, Gary, we were developing this whole thing and you think, oh my gosh, I feel so badly. And so you're feeling condemnation, and that is not what this is all about. Yeah, we certainly want to be convicted if we need to be, because that's what then makes change. Yeah. And it's going to be an ongoing process. How many years has it been? 2005 is a long time ago. We'll still catch ourselves reminding each other, oh, that wasn't very life-giving.
We'll just say it's been a couple of years. It just doesn't feel as bad. It's been a couple.
Yeah, but it is. And the thing of it is, the death words are all around us. We're going to discuss that even more about what can we do to create a better life-giving home environment for ourselves.
Yeah, we're going to dig a lot deeper into that in this episode, what we can do beyond just the words we speak.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The practicality of it.
Yeah.
Gary, how about you on speaking life? Just maybe a thought from the last episode.
Well, it's impossible to have one thought because there really is so much. Just picking up on what you guys are saying right now, including what Anne-Marie has just added into the mix. There are parenting tricks, there are parenting tools that are in every parent's toolbox. You could pull that tool out, you could apply it, it works, it's wonderful. But when you're talking about speaking life, it's not a tool, it's a way of life. And that's
so
why
true.
We keep coming back to, today wasn't a good day, I wasn't speaking life. And we think, why am I struggling? Why can't I just get this? Why can't I just be perfect? Well, because when you're changing a way of life from the culture of death, and you're now understanding the richness of the culture of heaven, speaking life in that whole transition is not going to happen overnight. But once you realize speaking life is a way of life, then you also realize it goes beyond just words. It's the attitude that's associated with it. It's the home environment that we are creating, the broader home environment that we are creating. So there's the mood as mom and dad, the life-giving mood or a death-giving mood that we're setting. So it goes beyond life, and we want all of our parents to understand when you have this massive life change, especially out of the culture of death. Sometimes it takes time, so give yourself a little grace.
Good.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And there's so many layers.
There is.
Layers upon layers. And I think that's what, we think we heard this message almost 20 years ago. Why don't we have it? And to give ourselves a little bit of grace, I think every year we learn a new layer. Oh, we could layer this on. We could layer this on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think there's a balance too between having grace and then having a vision and an expectation, a way to track, are we improving? Are we making progress on this? Because you don't want to live where you're just going to constantly be like, well, it's okay, we'll get better eventually. You want to have some type of, I don't want to say measuring stick, but some type of progress to say, hey, we're making progress with this.
And I think you take your own kid, the opportunities before them, they grew up in a life-giving home environment. They understood the message of speaking life. They are now raising their children with that message. And you compare that or contrast that with the fact that, our kids were already out of the home when we fully realized the significance of this point of theology. Your kids were halfway grown, or some of them, most of them have the blessing of growing up in this. But you realize, if I had started with this, if I started my marriage with this, how much further along we would be in the habits of that way of life.
Yeah. So if you're hearing this for the first time, or episode 2 is Speaking Life.
Maybe the second time if you listen.
Maybe the second time if you go back and listen to it again. Think of it as a marker. If this is all new to you, think of this as a marker and kind of mark this date in your brain that this is when you started this change and gone on a journey. Really think of it as a journey. That's really exciting. It really is.
And think futuristic. You think for your children's children. You want them to have that home environment, come into a home environment that's fully involved with the way of life, the message of life, the tree of life.
Yeah. I often hear parents with teens say that they want their home to be the hangout home where all their kids' friends come and hang out. And I used to hear that and think, oh, I do too. And I used to think that meant we had to have all the cool games. We had to have all the fun, which is great.
Or the pool.
Or a swimming pool. Or, honey, we have to put in a swimming pool if we want the kid. We don't have a swimming
That's a no.
But,
No.
That's a no. But it's not so much about the stuff that you have attracting the kids. It's the environment that they walk into. Are your kids and your kids' friends walking in to a life-giving home environment? And we actually had that happen. One of our kids brought home a friend over kind of New Year's. She came to visit us. And she commented
From college.
To our daughter that, wow, I just love hanging around your family. I can't remember the word she used. She didn't say they speak life, but her language let us know that she felt life.
I think she said your parents are really cool.
Oh, that was it. That was
That's
it.
what she shared.
Well, and you combine that with episode 1 and the husband and wife relationship that you're working on as well. That is such a reflection to teens or whomever is going to come into your house. So not only is that a home environment of life, but then to see a couple that's been married, because obviously by the time your kids are teenagers, you've been married at least as long as your oldest kid is. So,
unless you're a blended family. But
yeah, well, this is true, but even in a blended family situation, so few teens are seeing that today. That's a draw as well. So combining these first 2 episodes are powerful.
I want to say it may sound like we just have this perfect family. They cave in. It's funny because when our daughter said that, I was like, oh, that didn't feel like such a great week. Again, it's that C word that we've talked about, characterization.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I want to get into a little bit of what's going on in the brain with this whole thing. So not quite yet, but one of the things that I had...
Gary had something on the tip of his tongue.
No, but it has to do with...
Yeah. So, I was just, over the last couple of years, I've been verbalizing to more and more people, even my family, is my desire, my goal is that my kids and grandkids will never remember a day that I spoke a death-giving word. And my goal is that they will never remember that, in the sense that I probably will slip up every now and then. But my vision is that I speak life so much that totally washes out any death that I speak along the way. And I'm striving towards that. And I hope that does occur at some point. I don't think it's there yet, but I'm striving for it. Trying for it.
I think it will. Just sharing that years ago when with our classes, we would have our girls come in at the end, and we would leave, and the parents could ask them questions. And one of the questions that they were asked is, "Did your mother ever yell at you?" And it goes to this idea of this characterization, and
I remember
it'll
that
tie
because you turned off the tape.
And they, I guess, they, according to them, I mean, we didn't have it on video, it's just audio tape, but they said, "No, we don't remember her yelling at us." And I'm thinking, "Oh, thank you,
Lord, thank you for that spirit of memories." Yeah.
I know. But I think goes to the characterization. Hopefully I was not characterized by, I obviously remembered when I yelled at them and was not life-giving.
Right.
And everyone's image of Anne-Marie was just blown because we could not imagine you yelling.
So Gary, what about the brain? Let's get into that just for a few minutes.
I want to get into that by the segue that was already created by Anne-Marie and Julie. Why is it that teens will come into your home and just find your home so attractive? And that is actually tied not just to the home environment that you created, but it's so interesting. There's estimated 86 billion neurons.
And that's with a B.
That's a B. Billion neurons located in your brain. That's what makes you function. And within these neurons, there's a group of protein molecules. And what neuro researchers have discovered, for some reason, which they can't explain from a non-theological perspective, these neurons have these protein molecules that are very receptive to the life message. And not just receptive to the life message, they are very receptive to death messages. When I say receptive, it's receptive in the negative.
So like soak them in?
Well, the life message brings growth to these molecules. They respond incredibly. But the death message actually shuts them down. Okay. So when I walk into your home and I'm with all my friends, maybe I didn't come from a life-giving home, but I step into your home that is life-giving, my brain is actually finding, through those protein molecules that are responding, they're finding your life message very, very attractive. Now, there's just something soothing about your home. Now, if you asked me to explain it, I wouldn't be able to explain it if I didn't have the science behind it. Right. But that's exactly what is happening with the power of the life message. And that's why it's not just the words we use. Those are very important. It's our attitudes. It's our smile. We often will tell our parents one of the greatest gifts you could give your children to give someone else is to teach them how to smile. I remember your person, Ellen, she smiles all the time. That was so compelling. It's so attractive because that brings peace to the one who's observing. That's all part of the life message. And I think that's something that we can appreciate because it gets back to the fundamentals that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. God knew this. God understood this. He's the creator of this most ingenious thing that we call the mind, the brain.
What do you say, Julie, all the time? Something about your face? Like, say that, because that's really good.
Is everything okay? Yeah, everything's great. Well, you might want to tell your face that.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know how life-giving that is when I say it that way.
Whenever she says, "Is everything okay?" I'm always like, "Uh-oh." I'm not smiling. I'm like, "Uh-oh."
But it's true.
I'll get very preoccupied. And so what's happening here, we can get very serious and focused in our face. And our kids are watching that too. And they're watching our face. Our kids will joke about if they want to ask us something, they come in and give it a few minutes and, what's What's the mood of the room? Yeah. Do mom and dad have a smile on their face?
It's also, too, we talk about the resting face. What does your resting face do? I mean, does your resting face look like you're going to, like, attack someone? That you're mad? I mean, what does your resting face look like? I notice most people's resting faces are not real joyful.
Well, and as you age, those muscles that, like, hold if you're on YouTube, you can see this, they start to sag. So the resting face becomes a frown, and we don't even think it's a frown. So
Yeah.
as we age, we have to be even more cognizant of that.
Let's transition into the
Let's
atmosphere.
get off that.
Yeah, let's transition to the atmosphere of the home. Julie, what's one thing that when you think of the home and the atmosphere that you think is really important to focus on in a life-giving environment?
Obviously, we've talked about words, attitude, and tone. We also try to create opportunities where we can be interacting as a family and speaking life into our children. And there's a lot of different ways that we'll do that. Maybe we'll touch on a few. One I think of is mealtime. For us, having a meal together as a family is really important. And years ago, we decided that was going to be a goal of ours. And I think it happened after our two oldest boys at the time were probably like 5 and 7, and they wanted to play soccer. And so we signed them up for soccer, and they were just far enough apart in age that they were not on the same team. Their practices were not on the same day or even on the same field. It was just for whatever soccer season was, 3 months, we did not have very many family dinners together. And our schedules do not really allow us to have family breakfast or lunch. I mean, I'm home with the kids, so I can, but I'm saying including you as well. We felt something was missing. Our family kind of got out of sync. We had a lot of young kids at the time. And we decided to make it a goal. We felt like a family meal for our family was a really important way for us to connect. And so we made a goal. I think we hit a number, we wanted to have family dinners.
4.6 times a week.
Overtime, I'll throw out a number. I don't want people to get hung up on the number. While it was more of a principle that we want to have family time together. For a season, I would say we had a number. We had a goal that we were trying to hit because that was kind of the guide that we needed at that time.
To get back on track.
To get back on track.
Right.
And then it became a habit. And now we don't even count how many times, but we can tell if we're doing a lot of things during the week, we might say no to something because we're like, you know what? We haven't had a family meal together in days. And so we'll say no to something so that we can connect and have a family meal together. And our family meals, of course, involve eating food, but then the meal, it extends beyond the food. I mean, there have been times where we'll still be sitting there an hour after the last bite's been taken because we're talking through things. And we try to keep that a life-giving thing. We're interested in our children, what they're doing in their lives. We try to encourage them and speak into what's going on. They'll have questions. You often share things that are happening at the office and exciting things or tough things and how you've been dealing with them or speaking life into someone. So we invite our kids into our world and we try to step into their world and breathe life into them, speak life into them.
Yeah, Gary, anything on the family meal?
Well, yeah, as you're sharing, I'm thinking about who we're speaking to now and realize that there's a good possibility that we're speaking to dads and moms that maybe hardly ever had a meal together.
And as kids.
As kids, as growing up, or it was all in front of the TV. So it's
TV dinners.
Yeah, exactly. So as those that are listening and thinking, we want something different for our children, it's going to be changing a whole new way of thinking. So just take little bite sizes. Realistically, it may not happen 5 nights a week, but even if you commit to one evening a week to have a meal together.
Start somewhere.
Yeah, start somewhere. And there are so many tools now that are available, little discussion cards and things like, what do we talk about? I mean, I wouldn't even know how to begin. And maybe we can include some of those things even in the notes, the episode notes for that, because there are a lot of tools, but you've got to begin somewhere. And thinking as parents, okay, I want this for our family, so let's start.
One caution is we want to make sure we're not communicating is we're going to reduce the speaking life narrative down to make sure you have good family time.
Right, exactly.
The speaking life narrative, which includes the attitudes, includes the mood of the home, it includes our words. That again, goes back to being a way of life that starts from the rising of the sun and goes all the way through to the setting of the sun with our children. Mealtime, or what mealtime does, is it amplifies the opportunities to speak life, the opportunities to teach our children these life principles, even the theology of speaking life. I mean, there's so many more opportunities that take place during mealtime. And I know that even in our own parenting, way back when, we would always read stories. Before we cleaned the kitchen table. It would be similar to what you guys did, but we used a thing called books. And we would read stories.
I've heard of them.
Those who've gone before us that spoke to character issues. It could have been the character issue of man of faith, George Mueller, or it could have been the evangelist, Moody. I mean, there are so many people in our own history, theological history or biblical history, that provided such wonderful examples of character, and their narratives were always available. And so we would read the life messages of these people, and that was how we,
and that can lead to more dialogue as well.
Yeah, creating more opportunities. I think that also speaks to what we allow into our homes. And are we giving our kids, there's a lot of talk about healthy eating. What food are we allowing to go into their stomachs? But what content, what media, what book, what is going into their brain under our watch? And we have a lot of say into that. What do we give them an appetite for? If when they're young, we're giving them an appetite for really good quality stories about people of faith and people who've overcome, terrible things with good character, with faith in God, they will be attracted to that. And then when something comes in that is not the life message, is more death, they will recognize that. And that didn't make me feel good.
I think that appetite is created by what are we spending our time doing as parents.
True.
So if we're at home at the dinner table and we're finished with our meal, we're on our phone and we're just cranking through article after article and not talking with them, that's probably giving them a picture of what they're going to do down the road. Or I know one of the things, if you're not asking your kids or your spouse, what are some things that happened in your life? I mean, that's one of the things we do, not every night, but we'll do rosebud thorn. And a rose is something good that happened today. Thorn is a challenge that you went through today. And a bud is something you're looking forward to in the future. And I think we have to lead those conversations. And it's an easy way to get into conversation about what happened, what was challenging, and what you're looking forward to. And all of that can be taught into once you get those topics on the table.
Right.
Exactly. And it's the same thing. I mean, there's different forms, but just a simple question of who did you bless today? And asking that question of the kids who understand or old enough to understand that, but who did you bless today? Because that creates then the motivation for tomorrow. But okay, Dad and Mom are going to somewhere this week at mealtime is going to ask me, who did I bless? And I want to be able to tell them, I blessed this person, or I blessed my teacher, or I blessed little Billy, or I shared my dessert with someone who didn't have a dessert. And so who did you bless today? That's so much stronger than saying, okay, now let's share about who did you hurt today? Because now, see, once we do that, we've just stepped into the death world. We step back into the culture of death.
Right.
And God doesn't look at us and say, well, who did you hurt today? He looks at us and asks, who did you bless today? And that's what we're saying to our children.
And having that kind of a mindset of life giving, because I'm thinking of those parents that may be listening that have littles yet that don't quite understand all these concepts as they are old enough to sit at the dinner table. Obviously, you're not going to have as long a time as sitting at the dinner table with your young ones, but you can share with Dad, boy, Carrie, he was such a blessing today, and sharing some positive thing. He put his toys away without me asking.
Good job, Gary.
Yeah. But I mean, those are things we are sowing seeds into our children's lives that that it becomes a way of life for them.
Yeah,
So,
we're telling them we noticed.
yeah, exactly.
Sometimes they wonder, does it even matter if I put them away? She never tells me.
Yeah.
I think it can become this expectation. Well, I expect you to put your toys away.
Right.
I'll tell you when you don't.
Yes. Yeah.
As a mom,
Yeah.
hey. And then me telling Rich, there's even
Even more power in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's all part of
Creating a
mood of life.
life-giving home environment.
And anytime we're pointing our kids to the character of Christ, since he is the author of life, that is speaking life.
Exactly.
And I have to remind myself of that.
And as moms and dads, we have to remember we're with our children and we have this vision, we have this goal, whether it's mealtime or just throughout the day of speaking life. But we have to really evaluate our own environments when we're not with the kids. Maybe mom's, a function or a school function, whatever it might be, dad's at work or whatever, mom's at work. And that environment is going to have a profound effect on us. Are we bringing that environment into our home? And that's why the way of life, attitude, is so significant, because that becomes the filter that allows us to get somewhat to the doorstep and say, okay, this culture I'm leaving outside my door and I'm stepping into the safety arena of life.
What can that look like? Your job environment is rough. There's death, maybe even cursing all day long. You've got a 15-minute drive home. You're walking in the door to your family. How does one transition their brain?
There's probably a couple of ways, and more than a couple of ways, that people have figured out how to make this transition.
They could listen to this podcast.
That's very true.
That'd be a great start, right?
I think one of the most important features of overcoming a death culture is just being fully aware of its existence, realizing, wow, this is so different than our family. This is so different than our life-giving community. And just knowing that every day in media, every day often in the workplace, you're just surrounded by people. Not that they're terrible, wicked people. They're just people who are born and raised in the culture of death and don't know any different. And we're there to change that culture by speaking life. Because again, our ability to speak life into their lives will have not only effect on them spiritually, it'll have a neurological effect on them.
Will grow their brains.
It'll grow their brains. What it does is it brings peace, even though they don't understand that peace. So part of it is understanding. I think the other part, sometimes what I have to do is I just turn on my favorite Christian music, and I detox that way. I just start getting into, I'm sure by the second song, people are driving by looking at me really weird as I got my hands up in the air praising God and I'm singing, but it's one of those.
The neighbors know that you're normal, though.
I hope so. That's one of the ways, though, I find, okay, I've got to get this stuff out of me. Right. And sometimes worship, private worship, quiet worship, whatever you do, that does it.
Yeah. And I think of our kids. A lot of our kids are going to school, to the sports team that is very death-giving, and they have to make that transition. But they don't have the spiritual maturity that you do. And we as parents need to help them. Sometimes it's when they walk in the door. I can remember sometimes kids walking in the door and I'm like, who are you and what did you do with my sweet son, sweet daughter? But just sitting them down and saying, hey, sounds like today may have been a little bit rough. We can talk about that, but you are loved here. You're back in our family. And maybe they were speaking, sometimes kids can mirror. If they were spoken harshly to at school, they can come home and start mirroring those same words to a sibling. Mm-hmm. And instead of us jumping all over them and maybe even, wanting to discipline, just saying, hey, let's remember you're back in our family. We speak life to our siblings and let's start there. And sometimes just that little, oh yeah, I'm in a different country now with different culture. And I'm stepping into.
Too, as parents too, we need to evaluate the environments that we're allowing our kids to go into and the environments that we're stepping into. Spend time in prayer, spend time with good counsel from people that can guide us well, and determine, should we stay in those environments? Should we step into those environments? Or should we eliminate some of these environments and move to something else? Mm-hmm. And you may be called to be at a place of employment where you can breathe life into people, But if it is affecting you in such a negative way, then maybe you need to step into a different environment, because staying in that environment could not be healthy for the long term for you. And I think sometimes we're like, well, we're not going to change. We're just going to plow through this. Well, sometimes I think we do need to make changes. We do need to watch what we're allowing our kids to step into with sports teams and other things that they're participating in where it might be death-giving.
Well, I think the story that you shared in the teaching with the kids on the swim team, we also don't want our parents to think that we're talking, of isolating your children
right.
from
No.
because that we're not at all. But because we are talking about creating an environment of a life-giving home, then as your children do go out into some of these situations, they are going to take that with them. And I remember that scenario, kind of talking through some of that, and that, Ellen was old enough to be able to, and she was in a position of being able to influence the kids on the team, and they saw a difference.
Yeah.
Well, they're educated in the life message as a result of being educated in the life message because they come from a life-giving home. So it can't be just life-giving home.
Right.
It has to be educated. Ellen was able to recognize the death aspect in that relationship and was able to turn that around with her life message. But that's because she was educated, not just, hey, Ellen, speak nice because that's good and God's happy, but the education of what the profound effect that you can have on another person. And that's part of the beauty of mealtime, is educating your children. Hey, here's a scenario. Hey, what would you kids do in this scenario? And then you could be working through those scenarios with a life message, teaching specific examples as you're moving forward with them.
You hear this message, you really want to start moving on this as an individual, as a couple, as a family. You start working on building a life-giving home environment, an atmosphere where life is spoken, and you're moving that direction. And now you want to build it into a community of other families and things like that. What are some thoughts you guys have on that, as far as what are some intentional things that you can do to start building a life-giving community that will help champion you on this journey as a family, as a couple?
Well, one of the, I think, fortunate benefits that we have is we did not have to go family to family and teach this message, because once we were able to share it in a broader, just the conference, and it clicked for a few other people as well as, just the two of you, Rich and Julie. Families are attracted to the life message, not because Gary and Anne Marie gave it. They're attracted to the power that's associated with the heavenly power associated with it. People are at different levels, but the more they participate in a like-minded community, a life-giving community, the more all, using the old analogy, the rising tide raises all ships. That's what happens in a life-giving community. The stronger that each family becomes, the stronger the community. And so being part of a life-giving community is absolutely critical. The good news is you don't have to create it. You just have to start living it, and it will find you, because there's so many other, hundreds, thousands of families, tens of thousands of families that now know this message, and they're all striving. And you got to remember too, our life-giving community is not restricted geographically. Our life-giving community, as you guys know, is all over the world. It doesn't matter where we go. We had the same life-giving community in Australia, or we just came back from Singapore. We had it in Singapore. We have, when we have our conversations with our friends in South Africa, or maybe it's in Brazil. They understand the life message, and we're not restricted geographically. So we have, yes, that immediate community, but we also have to realize the excitement and the joy that's associated with having a multinational community that understands the life message, lives the life message, and they're part of us.
Another kind of practical way of creating the community, definitely living it out. But Growing Families does have tools. And we have, it's incorporated in every single series that we have from birth through the teen years. So, just have a few friends over, put it in, and go through it. Say, we're all in the same season of life. we were trying to grow and develop our parenting toolbox, you want to join us. I mean, it can be something as simple as that. Just those people that we rub contact with and we're already connecting with, and there's something that connection is there. They just don't have all the tools that they need. So that is
if I get any more specific, honey, session 2 of the middle years introduces, it's the latest deposit on the introduction of the Life Series. Session 3 of the Life Series spends all that time talking about how the life message impacts the neurological development of a child's thought process and life and emotions. So they can just get it even on the short segments on the Growing Family website. If they need, this is all, if they're thinking this is all new, where do I begin? And just go to www.growingfamilies.life, go to the middle years, short segments, and just start finding it.
So we'll have a link to those in the show notes so you guys can easily find that.
Yeah, lots of resources.
So I'm thinking, sometimes you get introduced to this message and you really start thinking about where the death environment came from. And it might have been parents or someone really close to you. What would you say to that? Because you're going to go through this, wow, this is really important, but man, it came from somebody or an influence, and that person is still in my life. How do you handle that? You got the emotions of how you feel about that relationship and what it did to you. And then how do you navigate that going forward? Maybe a few thoughts on that, of how people can work through that?
Sometimes it seems like it's an impossible task to try to educate someone who should have been an influence in your own life, or at least an equal peer as it relates to what life is all about. And now you're confronted with knowing the life message with full appreciation, and you so desperately want them to know it because you listen to them, you see their behavior, and you actually feel, which is part of the life message, you actually feel bad. You actually have sympathy for the person, realizing how much you're missing out relationally.
Yeah.
Because you live in a world of death. You speak in a world of death. You think you're thriving, but you're sinking in this world. And you could be lifted from that world. Basically, it's through the life of Christ, through Jesus. You could be lifted out of that world into the message of death, since he's the one who reunited us back to the life message. One of the ways people have done it, you guys have done it, I know in the past, is how do you communicate it? Sometimes it is saying, hey, would you mind sharing some time with me? And I want to share a video that I found very helpful to me, and I want to share it with you. We could do it together. Or you could say, you know what? Go to this website, go see it. Maybe they want it on their own. Here's a CD. Here's a DVD. Here's a book. Here's an article. But you could begin to introduce them to the life message. They could say, that's not for me. I grew up in a home of sarcasm, and that's just beautiful music to my ears. And say, oh my gosh, you didn't make any progress. But you did. You've alerted them to, there's another way. There's something even better. There's something more to life. Because when you talk about a death message, sarcasm being part of the death message, because you don't ever want to use that with your children, what ends up happening is you're giving them less. The life message is all about giving them more. So you can have, I think, an influence on that person, that family, that couple, that group of people that were supposed to be the good influencers in your life, but really turned out to be people who just continue to propagate the culture of death.
That's good. I think, too, asking the Lord for ways that you can honor people, but still sometimes some boundaries do have to be set.
Yeah,
to
it's fair.
Not have that death language spoken over you all the time, if that can happen. But I think there are ways that we can honor those people that we need to honor.
Yeah.
And it's asking the Lord for ways and being on the lookout for that, whether it's serving them.
Usually if you're serving, you're creating an opportunity to be a blessing to someone, and you're breathing life into someone. And when you're thinking about how someone can serve you, you're doing the opposite of that. at least in your own self. So the more you serve, the more you're going to breathe life into people, the more people are going to receive that.
Yeah. There's going to be people who are just not going to receive it. But we're looking for the people who will receive it.
Right.
You know. And what do you think about Richard, your own dad? What a great illustration of, someone's just sharing with him, hey, here's the life message. And it becomes transformational. For a lot of people, it's not that they don't want to change. They never realized there was a need to change. And once they hear the life message and how uplifting it is, they're attracted to it. They say, yeah, I could see this. I want to change course now. And that's the power that we who understand the life message are communicating to a world who's still living in the darkness of the death culture that we were all born into, but Jesus came and redeemed us out of.
We all know what it feels like when death is spoken to us, but we don't have the words. We just have that feeling and then can't express it. So when somebody is educated, I guess that could be the word, or made aware of it, it's like, why would you not want to have life spoken to you and to speak life to somebody?
I heard an analogy once that if you don't know about ice cream, but you know about vanilla frozen yogurt, you're going to think vanilla frozen yogurt is really, really good. Why would you want anything else? And then someone shows you chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream, and you're like, I'm never going back to vanilla frozen.
Or strawberry ice cream.
No, it would be chocolate chip cookie dough. Sorry.
Or deep chocolate.
Or we could talk about ice cream there for the time.
Well, those 86 billion neurons, we've got an opportunity. We're going to move from ice cream to breathing life into them.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think each of us desire for all of you that are listening to go on a journey of trying to make those neurons as healthy as possible. And it really does start with us. So what can we do as parents to breathe life into relationships that we have, our children, our home, and start there and just start little by little.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I think anytime I, as a parent, learn something new, we try to make it a priority to teach that to our kids. Now, when they're 5, it's on a very basic level, speak kindly, kind words. We can, at a 5-year-old level, explain what speaking life is. But if someone's listening and they have middle school, teenage kids, they understand so much. Talk about the 2 trees. Talk about speaking life. Talk about the author of life and where it comes from. Talking about virtue versus vice words and how we can, speak of a vice not by naming the vice, but the opposite of the virtue. And start to tell them what you're learning. I've found as we humbly go along and teach our kids, because sometimes we need to ask for forgiveness for if we've spoken a lot of death over them. But kids will usually respond to that really well. And then you're partnering with them. It's another way to, I think, create a life-giving home environment because you're bringing them along on the journey that you are on.
Yeah. Hit episode 2 for that. There's a lot more detail on that in episode 2 if you want to get more of that.
I just want to, maybe a final thought. Speaking life is the language of heaven, because when you speak life, you're speaking the character of Christ. When you think it through and you're communicating these truths to your children, what in fact is happening is you are separating the 2 cultures, the culture of death versus the culture of life. And you're doing it with your vocabulary. As we've shared in various messages using these illustrations, that in heaven, there is no meanness, because there's no meanness in God's character. There's only kindness. There is no selfishness, because in heaven, there's only generosity. In heaven, there is nothing that is corruptible, nothing that is dumb, because in heaven, it's all wisdom, because the character of God is filled with wisdom. And so as you are communicating these truths to your middle years or even the younger ones, it's still bringing them back to in the city of God, with St. Augustine called heaven. In the city of God, the language is life, because Christ Jesus is really the tree of life from which flows life to us. So tying it back to heaven, tying it back to the language is another way of simply using the proper words to educate your children in what the life message is all about.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Gary and Anne-Marie, for joining us. That was great.
Pleasure.
Thank
Really
you.
enjoyed that, and we hope you guys enjoyed this discussion on the healthy home environment. Thank you for listening to the Life Parenting Podcast hosted by Growing Families. We hope you've been encouraged and strengthened in your role as a parent. In the show notes, you'll see links to the growingfamilies.life website where you can find more information, including additional videos, links to sign up for online parenting classes, and information on how to connect with a Contact Mom. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. We'd love for you to consider subscribing so you get these episodes right when they come out. If you're enjoying the podcast, we'd love for you to give us a 5-star review on your platform of choice so that others can find this incredible resource. If you prefer the video format, please click subscribe to the Growing Families Life YouTube channel so that you'll see these new episodes when they're posted. Thanks for listening.